I'm Samantha Bitty, pronouns she, her. I'm a sexual health and consent educator in Toronto. I grew up in Scarborough in the TDSB. I really want to talk about an experience that I had with sex ed and how that translates into the way I try to practice as a sex educator today. So my biggest piece of advice for educators is, content is going to be content, curriculum is going to be curriculum, and we learn sex education from so many places. What is going to teach people the most is how we present that information, our body language, our tone of voice, our comfort or discomfort with that information. For example, in grade 6, it was like my first introduction to sex education beyond the this is your period. And my teacher at the time was an older white gentleman. And I say older because he had to be 65. He was the former Speaker of the House. Sorry to spill all your tea, Mr. Warren, but we did the kind of classic questions in the hat, and he would answer these questions, anonymous questions. And he pulls out a question, and it is, what is a dyke? And he immediately, his whole body told us that he was super uncomfortable. He was awkwardly getting up and off the desk and was a dyke is a very sexually active lesbian. And we all were kind of laughing, and it was, what it taught me, it wasn't even the correct definition of a dyke. What it taught me was that women having sex with women was something to be embarrassed about, that being very sexually active was something to be embarrassed about, or that there was shame associated with it. And, there's so many other things he could have said. And the way I try to shape that in my own practice is taking a look at, where do I have shame? Where do I have embarrassment? How do I work through that? And if I do come across as being kind of awkward or ashamed or embarrassed, just demonstrating what it is to be this makes me uncomfortable too, or that made me feel ashamed too. We don't have to be perfect, and we don't have to be the keepers of knowledge, but I really think it's important to think about sex ed from a pleasure-centered place. And the ways that we do that is to think about teaching sex ed in a way that encourages us to move towards pleasure as opposed to away from pain. We can identify risk, we can normalize risk, we can talk about how to mitigate risk, but the more we focus on what we do want versus what we don't want, the don't want is going to kind of pull itself into that. Whereas if we only focus on the don't want, we're leaving people with an inability to have experiences that they want to have. So I think that's what I have for this. Again, I'm sorry, Mr. Warren. Yeah.